We'll do a review in Likutei Sichos in Chelik Chof Bov. This is the third Sicha for the portion of Beshalach. Actually, this begins in the cycle of this project Likutei Sichos. We're going into the seventh and final year of the cycle. We did Aleph and Beis last year. This year we're doing Gimel and Chavav, and we're starting the next series of Likutei Sichos and Chelik Lamed, I believe it is, yeah. And we've been dedicating the Sichos that I'm learning Lilu Nishmas, our son, Rav Levi Yitzchak, who was a dedicated, devoted, and successful shliach of the Rebbe. And we've been learning the Sichos Lilu Nishmasai. Learning the Sicha is still in the Parshas Boy, because I prepared the Sicha for Beshalach during the Parshas Boy, and his yahrzeit is on Hey Shvat, which is in Friday, Parshas Boy. And I hope that the learning will be the Ilui and to benefit his soul. And Nistorim Darke Hashem, we don't understand uh, the ways, but what Hashem does. It's mysterious to us, but we certainly know that everything is divine, orchestrated by Hashem. And this is when he finished his avodah in Olam Hazeh, and it is our job to continue his legacy, his inspiration, and his love for Yiddishkeit, for the Rebbe, for Chassidus, and his dedication tirelessly, and till the time. So he's in proximity of already Yud Shvat as well, the time of the Ascholas HaNesiyas from the Rebbe, to whom he was Mekusher B'chol Nimen Afshei, Shabiva Kitzu V'rannu Sheikh Ne'ofer, V'hu V'soichom, V'bias Mashiach Tzidkenu. In this Sicha, in Parshas Beshalach, in Gimel, the Rebbe discusses an interesting thing, that the Mon, we always talk about the Parsha was an Omer. Whatever an Omer is a measurement. But then, in the end of the Parshas Hamon, the Torah tells you what that measurement is. That the Omer was a tenth of an ephah. So we know what an ephah is, and this is a tenth of an ephah. This is an Omer. Why does the Torah wait till the end to tell us how much the Omer was? Torah should have told us in the beginning. We're learning about the Omer the whole time in the Parshas Hamon. The Torah should have told us how much it is. Why is it only after we finish the entire Parsha that the Torah sort of, I'll tell you what the Omer is. The Omer is Asira Seif. Anyways, the Rebbe goes through a whole adichas. The Rebbe explains that there's two parts in the Omer, both from the physical and halachic perspective. The Omer was a shear by itself, and it's also a shear made up as a sidus eifa from a quantity. As we'll see, the Rebbe brings down from the Ragachover the two ideas of a shear atzmi and a shear mitzaref. And basically, as the Rebbe will teach us at the end, that there is two lessons from the Parshas Hamon. What they needed to know at the time of the Mon was it was an Omer, that Shiur Atzmi. The Omer, that's it. We didn't care what it's made up, because it is the Shir itself, the Omer Shir. But then for the future generations, after the Parsha is done with the Mon, the Torah tells us, Hasiris Haifa, that this is not only is a Shir Atzmi, but it also impacts in the details. We'll see in the great Arichas, as the Rebbe explains all these inyanim beautifully. We'll go step by step. Beshalach Gimel Aleph. In Parsha Seinu, beim Soif Parshas Amon führt euch the Torah. So at the end of the portion in which the Eibishter says that he's giving them the mon and the different laws of the mon and how they should collect it, führt euch the Torah. The Torah concludes, V'ha'omer asiris ha'efa hu. The Omer is a tenth of an ephah. There is an ephah shear, and the Omer is 1/10 of the ephah. Is the Chayre nicht verstanden? So seemingly this is not understood. Parvos zog the Torah dem shear von Omer. Why does the Torah tell us the amount, the measure of the Omer? Erst zum Soif Parshas Amon, only at the end of the portion of the month. No, then with the Torah that zählt alle Protim Vinyonim. After the Torah relates all the details, all the matters, wegen the mon, about the mon, bis noch sein Ende, till the end. What does it say? Uvnei Yisrael ochlu es amon arboim shono, that the Yidden ate the mon for 40 years, ad boyam aleretz nei sheves, until they came to a settled land, they ate the mon. After we conclude everything, after that, the Torah says, that it's a tenth of an ephah. Why is it saying it there? L'chayra, does the Torah gedarf zogen for it in the parsha? The Torah should have said it earlier in the parsha. Beim Demonen zum ersten Mal die Midas Omer beim Mon. When the first time the Torah says on Omer that the Mon was on Omer, Torah should have said by the very first time how much the Mon is. But the Omer asiris ephah. So why does the Torah only tell us the measurement of the Omer at the end after finishing everything? Now, the Bechai asks this question, and he answers that first we talk about all of the mon, and then we tell you the measure. But the Rebbe questions, what is the reason of it? Let's see, what's the rationale? The Rabbi Chaim is Masbir. He explains, quote, Mipnei shekol haparsha mivaeres inyonoi shel mon. The entire portion explains what the mon was all about. But ba'achar shehishlim hasipur be'iskei hamon. After the Torah concluded this story about the matter of the mon, the whole thing, what it took place. So now at the end, he has to tell you what the shir is. But what does that mean? Is that tirutz teirish biru. It would seem that this answer requires explanation. Farvos is der shiur ha'omer abazunder zach. Why is the amount of the Omer that it was a Sidus Eifah? This is something separate. This is not part of the area of the Mon. This nit kein Prat Puninyone Shulmon und Sipur Beiski Amon. Why isn't it not a detail of the idea Mon and the relation of what the occupation, what took place with the Mon? It is an Asidus Eifah. So how is that not part of the Mon? So what is the Bechaya answering? That first we're talking about the Mon, everything that happened, and then we're talking about what it is. This is an integral part, seemingly, of what the Mon is. Oy mit Asidus Eifah. And the Rebbe is explaining that if Asidus Eifah is just telling you an amount, then this is part of what says before. If the pasuk intend to let us know when it says Asidus Eifah, then shiur hameduyek from Omer, the precise amount of the Omer, what we're talking about, the steht früher in pasuk, Umaves needs ein shir, because it says earlier in the pasuk we don't know. So the pasuk is coming to tell you how much is that the oimed. If that's all what the pasuk is coming to tell us, is mitzad dem tam gufa. So for this reason itself, that we don't know what it is, had the shir gedav stein for it in the psukim. So this shir should have said earlier in the psukim, you're saying oimer, but you don't know what it is. It should tell you what it is. Warum the kamus shiur is nit ke zaitik and inyan. The quantity, how much was the oimer? That's not something on the side, not part of the mon story, the Asa Kamon. This is connected to the idea to understand. We're talking about a mon. We're saying an oimer. We don't know what it is, so he's telling you what it is. That's to say for who. And the Rebbe explains, elaborates. Yeridas Hamon is gekumen als Entfer of Tlunes b'nei Yisrael. The Mon descended. This was a response. The Jewish people were complaining. The Yidden said to Moshe Rabbeinu and Aaron, "As Haitseisem Oisonu El Hamidbar Hazer, you have taken us out to this desert. Lahom is as kol hakol hazeh berov, to kill this entire community in hunger." The Yidden were complaining to Moshe, "There's no food, and you took us out of Egypt, and you're going to kill the entire community in hunger." So about this, Hashem responded, I've heard their argument. Weiter is the Torah Mamshich, and further the Torah continues that I've heard the complaints. This is the instruction. This is what God has instructed. Liktu mimenu ish lifi ochli kol, collect every person what they eat. Oimer lagul goyles, one oimer per head. Mispar nafshe sechem, the amount of people, amount of soul. By yamoidu ba'oimer, so they measured in the oimer. V'lohediv hamarbe v'amamid lohechsir. The one who collected more than the oimer did not end up with more, and the one who collected less, lohechsir, did not have less than oimer. Everybody collected for what they need to eat, that oimer, the same oimer for everybody. So we're talking about a quantity over here, what they needed to do and to eat, and not less and not more, is doch negeya betoichen ksubin elu. So it's therefore important to understand these psukim, to wissen wie full is the shir von lifi achlei emer lugal gerlis. What is the shir according to what they eat? An emer lugal gerlis, that's been designed for every person they eat an emer lugal gerlis. To leave their achila l'soiva from them tog, how much is going to be a satisfying food for that day that we need an oimer, so we need to know how much it is. Uba oifen, as mer from them is nit given nötig, and in such a way that it wasn't, anything more wasn't important. And that's why if you collected more, you didn't get more because it wasn't important, the extra. Wenige davon is nicht gewesen genug, unless there wasn't sufficient. Ubemela hamamid lahechsir, the one who did less was not lacking. Weniger davon is nicht gewesen genug, and less than that was not sufficient. Less than the shear. Ubemela hamamid lahechsir. That's why, even if you didn't collect as much, you didn't lack. So the shear, it's not arbitrary. Collect something which has a precise measure, not more, not less. That is the sufficient amount necessary for the food. So if we need to explain what was that amount, so that's part of telling you the story of the Mon that what each one collected. Why don't we tell? Why is that not? Why does the Bachaya said that this is not part of the story of the Mon? This is an inherent part of the Mon. The Rebbe argues it doesn't really make a difference that it's a tenth of an eighth, or it's an oimer is an oimer. The reason the Torah tells it to us is because there is an additional aspect. As we're reading the story, we don't need to know the precise measurement of what an oimer is. Whatever the oimer shear was, the Torah is coming to teach us something else. That the oimer consisted of asidus ha'efa, which is something which is important not to know what they collected there. An oimer, we don't need to know what the measurement of an oimer, what it's made up of. But it's something that we need to know after we read the whole story, after the 40 days that they ate the month. Then the Torah tells us you should know that the Omer is Asidus Eifa. That's something that the Torah is coming to explain. That is going to be what the Rebbe is going to be Mechadish, the Shiur of Asidus Eifa, that Shiur Mitztarif is something which is important after the 40 years, after they came to the Eretz Neshavas. You should know that the Mon is Taka Nasiri Sa'ifa. This has a bearing on the future. Der Fun Gufe is L'ch'oire Muvan. So from that itself, the fact that the Torah does not uh, tell us before and says it over here, is L'ch'oire Muvan as der Posik v'ha'omer Asiri Sa'ifahu, that when the Pasuk says Omer Siris Eifa, is the nit nor oisen zu medias and dem shir von Omer Monda Gulgoilus is not just only trying to let us know what is the amount of the Omer Monda Gulgoilus. Was wird gesagt in the Parsha Frier that I said before, so this is explaining something of before. If you're wondering what the Omer was, I'll tell you it was a Siris Eifa. Nor mit dem Shir is Kavanosi zu Meisev sein, noch an Inyan B'Shaychus Lamon. This posik is intended here to give you the Shir, to add an additional aspect as it relates to the Mon. Was der Inyan is nicht verbunden mit Etzem Parshas Hamon. That's not tied to the actual portion of the Mon. The Yeridos and its descent b'meshach d'arboim shonei midbar in the 40 years in the midbar. Nor is negeya euch noch dem, wie der Posik lost wissen, wegen sein Ende. That's important also after the Torah tells you it ended, after the 40 years. Uvnei Yisrael ochlu es amon arboim shonat boim al eretz neshavos goim el k'tzei eretz Canaan. That Yid ate them on for 40 years until they came to a settled land in the edge, entering into the land of Canaan. There too, it's important to know that the Mon was Asiri Sa'efa, who, as important. But Rebbe learns that the reason why the Torah writes it over here, because we don't really need to know how much the Aimer is an Aimer, whatever the Shir is. But the measure is to tell us, after the Torah tells us that they ate it for 40 years, you should know that it is Asidis Eifahu, as the Rebbe will explain, how that is used for the future to teach us this other aspect of the Mon, that it's an Asidis Eifahu. In Hara 17, the Rebbe discusses that maybe Omer was known to them, so we didn't have to explain it. And only later on, Omer Asir Saifo is telling us what the shir is. But the Rebbe says still, should have told us, and not so at the end of the parsha. Uh, the Rebbe remains that there has to be something which is negeya, not to know the shear of the Omer, but a lesson for the future. And the Rebbe says that this would be understood, the uh, placement of the shear of the Omer at the end of the parsha, Asidus Eifahu, by first explaining another question, which seems to be a simple question. How could it be that everybody was satisfied with the same amount of food? The Omer fed big people, small people, people need more, but this amount satisfied everybody. Well, if it can satisfy an adult, why would a child need so much? And if should need less, so how is it that there's one shear? Now, there are a lot of miracles in the mun. It tasted whatever they wanted, the various different miracles, but it doesn't say anywhere about a miracle that the same amount was satisfying for a child and for an adult. So how could it be that this is not mentioned as one of the, it seems like that's a natural phenomenon, the same amount, but how is that? That's the Rebbe going to ask now. The Rebbe is going to explain there is a minimal amount which for everybody is the same for sustaining, needed to sustain. And then there is an amount needed to this specific individual. There's a amount which everyone is the same. Everybody eats the same, as the Rebbe will bring from Yom Kippur, as we'll see. And then there's an amount which is divided between people, and each one gets a different share. Let's look inside. Beis wird man das verstehen, behagdim an inyan aderish birur. We'll understand this by introducing another area which requires explanation. In them was the posik zogt, and the verse says, liktu mimenu ish lefi ochloi, aimer lagul goyles mispar nafshi sechem. Go ahead and collect from the mon, each person for the amount that they eat. And it says an omer for a skull, an omer per person, one omer per person. Mispar nafshi sechem, to the amount of people that in the family, that's amounts you could collect. And basically what it means, as far jeden for each one, hat man zusammengeklebt ein Eimer, they collected, they gathered together one Eimer. How is that possible to satisfy all people which have different appetites? In Teva b'nei Odom seinen doch Chilukim. In nature of people, there's differences. Ubifrat bein kotten legodl, especially between a minor and an adult, a child and an adult. B'negeya kamus hamozin was bringt lidei sevia, with regards to the quantity of food that brings to satisfaction. Wie can sein derselbe shiur? How could there be the same amount? Sai far a tinuk cotton, both for a small child, a small baby, und sai far a godel, and also for an adult. Ubefrat faraza was midas gufe is gresser, especially a person who has a larger body, wie bei andere gedolim. How could he have the same, being satisfied with the same amount of food that other adults have? How could we say that the same amount for a child and for an adult, and especially an adult who's a large adult, he's larger than regular gedolim. How could that amount of food that feeds the child feed this big adult and satisfy him the same? Well, you're gonna say no question about the mon. The mon is associated with all kinds of miraculous ways. So another miracle was same amount satisfied the child and an adult, a big adult. Although generally the descent of the mon and all the details in it is given on Inyan Nisi was something miraculous, a miraculous matter. And similarly is eating it. One came down in a miraculous way, and then it was uh, eating it, moitzi by kamotaimim, that you will find various different tastes in the mon, mishapik lekamotaimim, or as Rashi says, that it would turn into different tastes over there. The Gemara in Yoma said this. Uh, is in him is nit given kempselos. And also in the mon, there was no leftover. Unlike food, normally there is the food that you digest, and then is the thing that you extract, take out, but not from the mon. The mon was fully absorbed. Which means, so you see that the mon was a sort of a miraculous kind of a food, didn't have the usual natural phenomenons that come along with food, with the regular food. Was the river is lo yipoli, so therefore that should not be a surprise, as the selbe shir soll speisen jedem einem kedei tzorkei, that the same amount would feed everybody what they need. It's another miraculous aspect of the month. But the Rebbe says we don't find gefindt men aber nicht. That's not counted as one of the, while the other fascinating and outstanding mon areas we are mentioned as in the Chazal about telling us how the mon was. We don't find anything about that this was able to satisfy the adult and the child. We don't find it very specific openly as Razal soll madgish sein, that the sage of blessed memory to emphasize das is given einer von den Nisim Shebemon, that this was one of the miracles of the Mon. Al derech the Gemara zok by Kamen Yonim Shebemon, similar to the Gemara says by several aspects of the Mon, the miracle of it. Euch benegeya di Yonim v'shteim beferish in Posik, and also there is certain areas that the Posik itself says by certain matters, very clearly the great miracle of the Mon. V'Rashi zok benegeya, Hamar b'vamamid, Rashi says if you increased or you made less, as by Beitnis geblieben derselber Eimer Lagul, they were both left with the same Eimer Lagul. If you collected a lot, you collected a little. This is a fascinating and outstanding and non-normal way. You collect more and you end up with less. You collect less, you end up with more. So Rashi said this was a great miracle that took place with the Mon. So it doesn't say anything about that the same Mon can feed the adult and a child. Musman Zogan, why doesn't that count that? It doesn't say so anywhere clearly. Musman Zogan, Ados was an Omer is given genug, Sefer HaKotten b'Yosef and Sefer HaGodel b'Yosef. The fact that it was sufficient for a very young minor and also for a big adult is nit kain nes. That's not a miracle. The noisef in the mon, something added to the mon that it can feed everybody the same. It can satisfy. Nor das ist verbunden mit dem Geder von mon mitzateva mon. That's connected to the mon, the nature. The mon is not a natural food, it's not lechem in haaretz, lechem in hashamayim, within the characteristics, within the nature of mon, part of it that it could feed both together. They feed the same amount for the adult and for the child. That is what mon is. So it's not an additional miracle. So the Torah does, if it came down the mon, that's the miracle. But once you have the mon, it can feed both the same, the adult and the child. And therefore, we don't find this as an additional miracle. How so? So the Rebbe is going to introduce a similar idea to what the Gemara discusses over there in the Sugya of the Mon with regards to Yom Kippur. And we see over there too that there is one amount that can satisfy a huge adult and a very small person, as the Rebbe continues to bring down from the Gemara in Yoma about a koiseves, the size of the date, uh, that is the shear of Achila on Yom Kippur that you violate not fasting by eating a koiseves. Ois Gimel, der biur bazeh. So what's the explanation? So the Rebbe brings down that the sugyas hagemore in Masechta Yuma benegei amon, the section in the Gemara that discusses the mon, kommt inmitten von den Inyonim v'haloches wegen inu Yom HaKippurim. It comes in the middle of the matters and the laws about the affliction of Yom HaKippurim. Because there is a comparison, the Gemara learns that it says by the mon vayan chovayarivecho, what the inui is, the affliction that one has to be afflicted Yom Kippurim. We find man dort in Gemara. So in the Gemara there we find beim Shir Achila for Yom Kippurim, where it talks about the amount that one is not allowed to eat on Yom Kippur. A inyan was is mein von Chiddush and Al Bamon, a similar kind of novel idea, which is similar, somewhat of the novelty that we find by the Mon, that the same amount fed all adults and children, everyone the same. The Shir Achiyuv Ba'achila B'Yom Kippurim. What is the amount that you would be obligated for eating on Yom Kippurim? Is kikoiseves, like a date. When the Gemara zogt im tam. So what's the reason? Why a date? Why is that considered breaking, not fasting, not inui, is not affliction, as the Torah says. Anu es nafshi seichem. So the Gemara zogt im tam. So the Gemara says the reason kim luhu l'rabbonon, because the Rabbanon knew this was their accepted. The rabbis knew that the Behochi because chiseves misve daite, that is what relaxes. If a person is hungry, what settles his down, what settles his mind from his hunger is the size of a chiseves, of a date. But less than that, it's not called breaking the fast. It's not called not inui, because loy misvedaite, the person's mind does not settle down. So you're not really breaking your fast, or you're not really not ma'ana. You're ma'ana because you're not misvedaite. And the Gemara says, mihu kula alma tuva. All people, average size people, that koiseves will settle them down a lot. The Oig Melech HaBoshen, and when we talk about a giant like Oig, king of Boshen, who is an example of a huge person, a giant, Porto, it still will calm him down the size of a kisevis. That same kisevis settles down both the ordinary person and oig. How much settles down? A lot by an average person, a little by them, but it settles them down by both. So, a similar question, is seemingly this is surprising. Was is the Harasbore from them Teretz? What's the explanation? The Gemara says that's not considered if you eat akiseves, then that's considered no more fasting because your mind settles down. So that's why we have a kiseves as the shiur for Yom Kippur, for for not fasting. We can doch wieder fragen, but you can still ask. Ob der Shir kiseves is misvedaita und eig melech haboshon, if a amount of a kiseves is sufficient to calm down, let's say a little bit, but von eig melech haboshon, that was coming, so it should, if you calculate it, it should come out as so the misvedaita from gewöhnliche bnei adam to come down. Ordinary people, darf sein genug a kleinere shir wie kiseves, should be sufficient a smaller shir than a kiseves. So why is a kiseves a shir for the biggest person and the smaller? How does the Gemara explain that? If, on the other hand, if by everyone a kiseves settles their mind from gewöhnliche bnei adam of ordinary people, darf sein genug a kleinere shir wie kiseves. So then, so it should be smaller than a kiseves. If for it's enough a kiseves, so ordinary people need less. Unoi by kulam is a kiseves misvedaitayu. And if we're going to say no, it takes a kiseves by ordinary people, by kula almo, we can assign. So how is it possible as there's no bashir, so pezain, the misvedaita, the same shir should bring about also come down from Eid Melech HaBosha, from a large person like from a giant like Eid Melech HaBosha. So the Gemara answers, how is it for the same? Because a lot or a little, but how could this misvedaita be for both of them that are so different physically, and both of them are misvedaita from that shear of Kisevis? Is mizeh gufa muchach. So from this it's evident, from that alone. As the sheer kiseves was is misvedaita, that amount from kiseves that settles down, calms the person down from his hunger, is ashir v'chamesich nit mitten goyd laguf. It's not a measure that can be measured how large the body is. It's a shear, an independent shear. That's the shear which is misvedaita, regardless of what size body you have. V'yeshloimar shezeu al derech hayidu d'shalkele v'tarya v'negeya d'shiurim in halachas v'dinei haTorah. So the Rebbe says this, we can say, is similar to the question as far as the measures and halachas din haTorah, when the Torah says a certain shiurim, as the Rebbe will soon bring down also, the Rebbe brings down from the Ragashover, with regards to the machlokes of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. According to Rabbi Yochanan, a chatzi shiur is asur min haTorah. We know that in order to get malchus, for example, for eating nevela chelav, you need a kizayis. But what happens if you eat a chatzi zayis? So you don't get Malchus, but the question is, according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's still Osur. Chatzi Shir is Osur Min HaTorah. That you might not get the penalty, but there's an Isur, because Rabbi Yochanan says that the Shiur is a collection. The way you get a kizayis is put together from smaller pieces, and altogether make it into a punishment, but each piece of them is still osir because it's a combined shear. According to Rish Lakish says a chatzi shear for eating a half a zayis of a nevela, you won't get malchus because it's nothing, because it's not a combined. Let's look inside. The Shloimar says, "Zo al derech hayedu the shakle v'tariyah v'negeya di shiurim in halachas v'din Torah." The debate with regards to the measures in the laws of the Torah, as the Hagdara from dem Shir can sein fanim, that the way to define the amount, that when we say a certain amount of, as I use the word of exais, the one you can say ashir mitzaref, is it a amount that is combined, put together till you get the bigger shear? It's a combined shear. Or the ashir atzmi, it's a shear itself, not covered. What is looked at is now. The Ragachover is meilich by kama v'kama dinim. The Ragachover gets into great detail about these differences by many dinim, by many halachas. Onhebendik, to begin with, is from der plukta klolis, the general disagreements between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish. By Chatzi Shir, the question is a half a shir, which you don't get the penalty, but Tzias is Osur Min HaTorah. Is it prohibited from the Torah? As dos is a machloikes in them gather closely for shira isur. That this disagreement with Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish, whether you'll be Osur, Achatzi Shir, depends in the general definition. What is the idea when we say a shir, an amount of Isur? The Das Rabbi Yochanan, as Chatzi Shir is also Min HaTorah, according to Rabbi Yochanan, who says a half a shir is prohibited from the Torah, maintains what it means. As der shir was the Torah geasert, that the amount that the Torah prohibited, let's say a gzais, is a shir mitztaref. And kazai, it's a shir that is a combined shir. A whole bunch of little pieces become to like kazais. Besteht von chalokim, it consists of parts, velchaveren mitztaref zusammen, bis zur ganzen shir, which become combined together, they make up a whole shir, the shir of the Isur. V'meila is oichav hapochus mikishir, so therefore, if you have less than the amount, is Shmoida Yisur Olav. The name of the Yisur is on him because it's a part of the Yisur, because the Yisur is made up from parts, and that is a part of the Yisur. However, the Torah doesn't punish for such a small parts. Is nor was there einish of an Yisur is Shayich. It's only that the punishment for this Yisur can only apply nor when it's do that Tzir from ganzen Shir, only when you get the combination of the entire Shir. That means that a shir is a shir mitztaref. Aber Rish Lakish's view is, as the shira isur is a shir atzmi, that the isur shir is not a combined from a bunch of pieces, it's just, that is the isur kizayis. Less than a kizayis, there's nothing there. It's not a smaller shir. It's not mitztaref. It's not at all. Und der Farvens is do weniger from shir. If there is not, there's less than the amount which is asur, which is punishable from the Torah, is lav klum, is nothing. Says if them überhaupt nicht chalder geder isur, over there it doesn't at all rest the isur was the Torah geaset, the Torah prohibited, and therefore chatzi shir is mutter according to Reish Lakish. So the Rebbe says the same thing is with the shir of Kiseves, that this is sort of a shir atzmi. It's not a made up from a whole bunch. That is, if you have a Kiseves, doesn't matter, person settles down. No Kiseves doesn't settle down. It's not that it's added a little bit more because it's a greater, but it doesn't measure by the amount. It's a shir atzmi. How do we explain this? The Rebbe goes on to explain there is a general vitality to connect the body with the life force requires food. There is one aspect which is just that connection. A connection, a life force, isn't measured by a large, small, a child, a giant, a child. Life force is the same. To connect the life force, you need one amount. Then there is a life force which is measured, which increases according to the individual, according to the different parts of the individual. That's something which has a connection to the various different parts. The Rebbe is getting at, as we'll see, the Oimer and the Asiri Saifa. These are the two parts. It's the same Oimer. It's either an Oimer or Asiri Saifa, as we'll learn. I'm getting ahead of myself. The Asborabas, a Dalet. In the Mchayis HaNefesh Beguf, seine Do Bechlolus Tzvi. In the vitality of the soul and the body, there are generally two aspects. Aleph, der Chayis Kloli, was is Mechayid am ganzen Guf B'Shova, the general life force which vitalizes the entire body equally. Makes it alive. Doesn't matter what part of the body, a living thing. It becomes alive. In them Chayis, is netokin chiluk. In that vitality, there's no difference between them oifum ver is mechayed dem roish. There's no different way than that it vitalizes the head, ver is mechayed the andere chelka guf, and how it vitalizes the other parts of the body. By ze alle is der chayes ba'oifum shove. By them, the vitality is equal. All the different parts of the body that are alive doesn't make a difference what part of the body. Das heißt, that means those was der Mensch slept. The fact that you're alive, that is a chai, that is living, that is something alive, is gleich in dem ganzen Guf. That's equal in the whole body. Und geschehen wie in dem chais. And just like in this one body, it's all the same. The same thing is everybody, person's life, whether a giant or not, is the same. The life is the same. Geschehen wie in dem chais kloli is nitoke chelukim in demselben Guf. This general vitality, there is no differences in the same body between the moyach shabarosh, the ekev shabaregel, between the mind, which is in the head, and the heel, which is in the leg. Life is life. While the chayus klolud is nit modud mugbal loit chelke aguf, because this general vitality isn't measured, is not limited according to the various parts of the body. Which is Mechaya, is life force equal everywhere. That likewise, there's also no difference in this general life force between one body and another body, a big, a large. By jeden einem is their nefesh v'chayis hakloli, their nefesh in the mzelben oifen. By each one, the soul, the general life force of the soul, same way, you're alive. A nefesh v'nayelad cotton, you have a soul of a small child, has the ability to vitalize the body of Eg Melech HaBoshan. Even it's a soul, a nefesh, a chayis of a child. It's the same, because in chayis isn't measured big or small. It's chayis makes everything alive, whether it's big or small. That's the chayis kloli. Then you have the chayis proti, the individual chayis, was is abgemosten lefi tchunosei shel haguf, that is measured according to the characteristic of the body, ulefi kol chelik shebeguf, according to each part of the body, the general characteristic, a big, small, a different kind of body, or within the body, each part of the body. Jeden eiver v'chelik from the guf In every limb, every part of the body is the chayis behesem mider tchuno umezek from mechelik va'ever. The vitality fits with the characteristic, the chemistry of that part in that limb. That's how the chayis connects in an individual in a specific way. In the roish, in the head, which is a more refined part of the body, is the chayis proti. That individual vitality is in meir mer, over there it shines more. Vi in andere chalokim. Then in other parts of the body, in the head gets more. Similarly, in every limb and limb according to his characteristics. And in them chayis, when we talk about that level of chayis, the chayis proti, seinen Eichfaran chilukim zwischen ein Guf and another Guf. There's also differences between one body and another body. That makes a difference because it's a measured according and dressed up according to that specific part that it's person that it is vitalizing. So now we're going to see, to get this vitality from the general vitality from the soul to the body, which is equal everywhere, that is enough. A Kisevis can accomplish that. Der Chibur for Nefesh und Chayes HaNefesh mit dem Guf wird aufgetan al yedei Chibur. What brings about that connection of the soul and the vitality of the soul with the body? That's accomplished eating. You eat, you connect the nefesh with the guf. Kidua has known that that is what connects. The food is the connecting piece that allows for the nefesh to be mechai the guf. Seinen in them oifaran zwei eifani shiuri achila. Over here too, there is two ways of eating that food that connects them. There's two types of food, two ways of food of eating to connect. Aleph. Der Shir Achila, welcher is verbunden mit dem Klolus Chibur HaNefesh beguf, mit dem Chayis Kloli. The amount of food which is tied with this general connection of the soul with the body, with the general life force. Was tut oifas der Gof soll sein achai, which accomplishes for the body to be alive. Wie bald as der Inyan, since this aspect, those was their Guf, is achai, that the fact that the body is alive is nicht zu neivgestellt from protim, it's not put together from details. That's the shir atzmi. It's not a shir mitzdaref. It's not put together. It's move on as the achila was tutoiv dem chibur. Therefore, the food that accomplishes that connection, the general chayis, b'shteit nit fun tziruf protim. It does not consist of a combination of details, nor is a shir atzmi. It's its own. It's a shir atzmi. That's the food that brings about that general connection of the chayis of the nefesh with the guf. V'meile is in them shir achila nitokin chiluk. So therefore, in the amount of eating, there's no difference zwischen ein guf mit hatzveit, between one body and another one. Und das is der shir kisebes. That's where you have the amount of a kisebes. Was kiblu rabon and the bachim misveh daitai. The chachamim have it by tradition. They know that this is settles the down. Hepech inui. This is not affliction. The person calms down. That is sufficient amount to accomplish that chibur nefesh, the chibur kloli from the nefesh with the guf and yed einam in kol elum kulei, for everyone in the whole world. Oich von oich melech haboshem. Also oich melech haboshem. That is that shir atzmi. Das ist a shir atzmi, azoi vidar chayis hanefesh. That is a shir. That is the essence shir, just as the vitality of the soul. Der chayis kol v'shebeguf teltzich nit. Just like the general vitality of the body that does not compartmentalize, not detailed. One chayes. Base, that's one type of eating. The shir achila velchid is verbunden mit nechayes proti. Then you have an amount of eating which is tied to the individual chayes. Was is abgemasten lefiklei haguf shaloi, which is measured according to the person's body, uh, his vessels, his body, exactly, and according to his specifics. But often, in such a way, as was geresed der gufis, the greater the body is, als geresed is der shir mosen. So you need a greater amount of food. Was is nötig for chayis proti, which is necessary for that individual vitality. Und das ist der shir achila, welches ashir mitzdaref. That is the amount of food, which is an amount which is a combined from many parts to allow for the different levels of the person. The large one has to eat more, a small one is less. While der chai is besteht from protein b'chol ever ve'ever, because that vitality consists of details, every limb and limb. Ubimela is move on, so therefore it's understood as eich der shir achila v'sishayich to them chayis, that also the amount of food which is connected to that vitality, Sunay Gestalt, is put together from prat from detail. Jeder prat von dem Shir is moisi von der chayis. Every detail of this amount adds to the vitality. Und es messt sich bei jedem Einen lifigoid laguf, and it's measured by each one according to the size of his body. That's the level of chayis, which is a detailed and a specific and made out of details. So it depends each one according to the size of the body, or what the part of within the person's own body. As it's fitting to the life force of the soul and the details. So that brings about the amount of food which is specific to each individual that gets that specific chayis. And the Rebbe will continue to explain now that this is why we had the two levels. We have Omer, which is a general shir, it's a shir atzmi. And then you have Asiris Ha'efa. Asiris Ha'efa is already a measured shir. Hey, so based on this, we can explain as it pertains to the mon. The difference between these two languages and the amounts verstehen by mon, that says by the mon. It says Omer, unasiris Ha'efa. A tenth of an Efa talks about specifics. Omer is a shir atzmi. Is the Loshen Asiris Ha'efa, when you say a tenth of an Efa is madgish, it emphasizes a shir, it's an amount, this is a chelik von aggressor and shir mizeh, as it is a part of a greater shir, a larger shir. It is a tenth of an Efa, this is part of a larger shir. Efa. Rashi is befarish, as Efa is sholish soin chulo, that's 3 soin. Nimtzu Asiris Ha'efa, which is a tenth of 3 soy. Men gibel beitzim chemish beitza, that's the shear of the Omer. 43 and a fifth eggs, size of egg, that's the amount. So this is a smaller partial shear of the Efa. Mashenkin the Loshen Omer stam, when you just say Omer, is nit madgish ashir, doesn't emphasize that this is an amount. Welche is zunächst gestellt from protein, which is put together from details. Mem gimel beitzim chaimish beitza to 43 and the 50. No, not ein mida. It's one measure. Omer, it's Omer. Und das ist der Tam. That's the reason. Was in der Parshas Amon Kula sagt der Teure of Lois, Omer lagu goylus. So what did the Teure says Omer lagu goylus? By Yamoidu ba Omer. Doesn't say how much. Kietzba. Und erst besim la'achere ha Parsha is the pasuk befared them shir, and only in the end After the portion, the pasuk details the amount. V'oimer asira seifahu. Why? Well, in der Parsha Retzich Beikar wegen Ashira Oimer von Mon, nicht there is Ashir Mitztaref, because in the Parsha we're talking about the Mon, not as it's a combined shir, it's just a shir atzmi, no Ashir atzmi. V'chatelt sich nicht, the Eichos does not uh, divide itself up, it remains always, you cannot make, it's not put together. The Eichos, it can be less than that. It's either or. It's an oimer. That's all what it is. There's nothing less than that. Nothing making it a detail. Warum Iker in Yoni from one is to Oiftom dem Chibur von Etzem HaChayis, because the main idea of the Mon is to accomplish the connection of the essence of the energy. Von Chayis Kloli mit dem Guf, from the general vitality with the body, al derech shir kesebes. Und der Chidush Vapella von Mon is bestanden in them. What was the novelty and the surprise of the Mon consisted, was chosh das is given am Mosen, was hat euch gepoilt, dem Chibur von Chayis Proti mit dem Guf. Even though this was a food that also impacted the connection of the detailed Chayis with the Guf. We're saying, we're just emphasizing the Chibur Atzmi, the Shir Atzmi of the general Chayis, but the Mon really accomplished the Chayis also in the individual Chayis, not only the general Chayis. Is das aber gewesen bei euch von und durch dem Chibur von dem Chayis Kloli. But the way it came about, that came from, and through that general Chayis connection later on came also the individual connection. So idea should ask me from Oimer, came from the Oimer. That's why it's only about Oimer. That's the way the Nefesh stayed connected to the Guf with the food that the Mon provided. And that's Negeya to the whole thing, because that was the main aspect of what the Mon accomplished. Not some Seif and their parshas of their posik, but at the end of Parsha, the Pasuk says, Va'oimer asira seifu. Here, the Pasuk comes to tell us also the detail. Lahisif. To add, as der Monat in sich gehad, oich, ageda for Shir Mitztaref. It also had that aspect of a Shir Mitztaref. And why do we need to know that now? That we are shloimar, as that Inyan is nita zoy negeya, that aspect of it, that shir mitztarif, that was also in the mon, which was a siris ha'efa, wasn't important to the eating of the mon during the 40 years. Verdavke besoif la'achrit kufazu. Only at the end of this period, over there, it's important that it also vitalizes all the details. And these are the two aspects of Oimer, is the Shir Atzmi, and that is the connection of the Chayis Chloe that was brought about through the Mon. And although the Mon also did the Shir Mitztaref for all the specific Chayis, but yet it was all associated with the general Chayis. But the real specific chayis, that the mon is something which is important after, and that's why the Torah tells us after Mevoy Meloris Nesheves, Beha Oimer Asirus Eifahu, also the level of Mitzaref, as the Rebbe will continue to explain.